Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. And before we start off with the session, I want to know how many of you know what ink is? Okay, so not too many of you. So I would just like to take about 2 minutes to tell you what ink is, and then we can go ahead with the session. You know, all of us here are in search of something. You know, we are in search of the next billion-dollar idea. You could be in search of the next God particle. You could be in search of a perfect soulmate. But just like that, at Engg, we are also in search of something. We are in search of those perfect stories, ideas, and perspectives. So every year we go across the length and breadth of this country to find out the most fascinating stories that we can come across. You know, when James Cameron does something, the whole world knows about it. But what if there is an equally fascinating person whose name is Arunachalam, and he's from Coimbatore, and the world does not even know about him? So we look for such incredible ideas, and we do that every year at our Engg conference in association with TED. So today we are going to be bringing, the speakers that we have today are going to be sharing their unconventional journeys with us. The journeys which are not measured in terms of money or dollars that they have made, but the amount of impact it's created in people's lives. So moving on to the start of the session. India is one of the most populated countries in the world, and there is constant rise in demand for one thing, and that is space. So it has become more and more important for us to utilize space very efficiently. And our first speaker, Alok Shetty, is going to share his idea about how can you use space more effectively by simply thinking out of the box.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me. I want to speak to you today about hypothetical situations. Since all of you are still in college and you're designing concepts and it's not yet implemented in the real world, I want to tell you about 4 projects that I designed when I was in college or a little bit after college, and I only designed them as concepts. And right now, all 4 of them are being developed in the real world. So I want to speak to you about the power of a hypothetical situation. Okay, we'll start with when I was 8 years old. My father was also in construction, so I would spend all my holidays with him at construction sites, learning how to operate big excavators or dozers. And I realized that I wanted to be in the construction field. I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to make things. And so fast forward to maybe 10 years later, and I was in architecture school back in Bangalore. I was in my 3rd year of architecture school, and I heard about this competition to design a hospital. It was just concepts, just to design concepts. So I said, okay, fine, let me take part. And I entered the competition, and I ended up winning the competition. But the people who started the competition, they came to me, they called me up, and they said, listen, we like your ideas so much that we want you to come on board and design the real hospital. And I was only 20 years old at the time, and I had no architectural license. And at that point, we weren't allowed to use computers. We had to hand draw everything. So I taught myself AutoCAD. And before we started the design process, I would go and I spent an entire year in hospitals, interviewing doctors, interviewing patients, and asking them what they thought was not correct in a hospital and what they could change in that hospital, what they could change. Once we gathered all these inputs, I taught myself, and then we started to design it. And before you knew it, we started construction. And you know, up until that point, everything that we had designed, you could see only on a computer screen because it was all virtual. But when I stood and I took this picture, it was the happiest moment because whatever I had designed, you could actually walk through it. It's a great feeling. Exactly 1 year after I took this picture, I went back and I stood in that same place, and the project was completed. And just last year, we received news that this hospital is now the first hospital in India that has got international accreditation. So what I realized when I was working with doctors is that they have this saying called Occam's razor, which means the simplest solutions are most often the right solutions. Because when a doctor, when they diagnose a patient, if it's a cough or a fever, they don't think it's a brain tumor. They always think what is the simplest problem, and then they start. So we try to use that same philosophy in all our architectural pursuits. Like whenever we had a problem to solve, think of the simplest solution, and most often it would have been the right solution. So that was the first project. Moving on, we'll go to the second project. The Bangalore airport, I don't know how many of you have been to Bangalore, but the Bangalore airport, once it was done, they had a competition to do the expansion because it reached capacity very fast, the new airport. So they started this competition for students to enter. And we started it maybe 2 months before we started, me and one of my friends. We were like, okay, fine, let's take part in this competition. And for 2 months, we came up with all these different sketches and ideas and all of that. But we were not happy, not at all happy. The day before we had to submit the final presentation, so this is the airport, and the green area is what we had to develop. That's the area that was for development. So the day before, we came up with this sketch, the night before actually. And that entire night, we converted this one sketch into this. So it integrated everything. It integrated the metro, it integrated the high-end expressway and all of it. And we were very happy, and the response was great when we gave the presentation, but we didn't win. We came third. See, that's me and my partner in the back with a very sorry face. But after this, they called us back a week later, and they said, your ideas were the most practical ideas. And we sat down with the actual architects, the big architects of the thing. And now, these are the new proposals for the Bangalore airport, which the international architects proposed. This is what I had submitted. This is what the new proposal is. This is one of the sketches that I gave. This is what the new airport is. So, even though we were only 21, 22, we had a saying in how one of the biggest international airports in the country were made. Again, another hypothetical situation converted into something that was actually being developed in the real world. Next project. So let's go back in time, and you see the Greek civilization, they built in stone because stone was the most abundant material around them. Similarly, the Mesopotamian civilization, which is now Iraq, built in brick because they had two rivers, the Tigris River and the Euphrates River, so they had a lot of clay, and they would bake the clay and they would get brick. So they built in brick because brick was around them. But today, what we are doing is not that. We are using outdated methods of construction, and we're depleting resources. So if you have to think about it, what is the most abundant material that is available to us? It's garbage. Everywhere, all around us, there's so much trash, there's so much garbage. And we know that it's very expensive to get rid of garbage. It's a big source of pollution, and it leads to a lot of disease. But what if we could get an advantage from garbage? Okay? What if instead of it, we could make money off of it and use it as a construction material? So we designed solar-powered trash compactors. So we can put them on every roadside. During the day, when you fill it up with trash, it charges. And at night, the compactor comes down, and the volume of trash decreases to almost a tenth of what it actually was. So when your handlers come, it's easier for them to handle it, and they take it back to the landfills or dumps or whatever. There, it is again segregated. So based on if you have Pepsi cans or whatever, that becomes a different kind of construction brick because it's a heavier material. If you have water bottles, then those become another different kind of brick. It's a lightweight material. And what happens is we cover it, the whole brick, in a layer of bitumen. So it completely sterilizes the trash compactor. And then we take it to like earthquake-prone areas like Bhuj and in Gujarat, because it's lightweight bricks. So even if there's an earthquake, if the building falls, there's no loss or damage to property. The final project I'd like to speak to you about is a place where we're sitting at. Because from, a long time ago, we love to tell stories. We used to sit around a fire and we used to tell a lot of stories. But our stories have gotten bigger and better. We have video and music and all of that. So we were trying to decide how could we design a space to tell stories that could be used anywhere in the world. So we started with, okay, it has to be deployable, which means you can send it anywhere across the world. It has to be very low cost. It has to be all inclusive, which means your lighting, your acoustics, all of it has to be come with it, and it has to be flexible because there are open areas, there are closed areas, there are slopes. So how can you design a space that conforms to all of these aspects? So we looked at the world map and then we saw all these shipping routes. Okay, so if you look at a shipping container, it is a prefabricated product, so it can be made very fast. It's in excess. You have one in your field, and you have an opportunity for sponsorship. So we were like, okay, fine, let's try and use a shipping container and try and make an auditorium out of it. But then we were thinking, okay, we need to bring the seats out, we need to bring the seats back in. How do we do it? How do we actually design it? And this is what we came up with. So basically, a closed shipping container, a 40-foot container, would be converted in under 4 hours with just 4 people into this. A 250-seat auditorium, completely all-inclusive. So you can drop it in the middle of a desert because even the canopy that it has photovoltaic cells sewn into the fabric, so it generates its own electricity. And you can put it on a slope, you can have different kinds of configurations all over the place. So what we did was, since we had to send it all over the world, we made like a catalog, like an instruction manual, and it has very little text. It's only pictographs, so there's no language barrier. So it just tells you there's part A, part B, part C, part D, and this goes here, and you're done. So that's how we finished it, and now, because the response has been so good, we're actually designing mobile schools and mobile clinics also, along with auditoriums. So I just like to end by saying that, never underestimate the power of hypothetical situations, because you're still in college, you're designing concepts, take them seriously, and if you follow through, you can, always make sure that your products are developed in the real world. Never, always try to think outside the box, even if the box is a big shipping container. Thank you.